The PAC paid over $108,000 for strategy consulting to a fashion designer by the name of Hervé Pierre.
Whispers, boycotts, closed doors, and one woman in a gown that ignited it all. For nearly a decade, Hervé Pierre dressed Melania Trump, the most polarizing first lady in modern memory.
The day before inauguration, I was at the White House. We were doing hair and makeup, and the First Lady, she looked at me and said, "Hervé, do you know that tomorrow your name will be all over the news?"
But only now, at 60, is he breaking his silence with raw honesty about what unfolded behind those elegant seams. From political fallout to fashion industry exile, Pierre's journey was anything but polished. This isn't just about style, it's about scandal, loyalty, and the personal cost of dressing power. Get ready for exclusive revelations, untold stories, and the quiet bond that endured the storm.
And First Lady Melania Trump presenting her 2017 inaugural ball gown to the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History.
From sketchbooks to back channels, here's what the public never saw until now. The phone call that changed everything. Hervé Pierre was not a household name in 2016, not outside fashion's inner circles anyway. He had built an impressive resume over decades, working with legendary houses like Oscar de la Renta, Balmain, and Carolina Herrera. But when he left his position at Herrera after a long tenure, Pierre found himself in an unexpected limbo. His phone wasn't ringing as much. Designers weren't offering him new roles. His next chapter was uncertain, until a call came from someone entirely outside the traditional fashion pipeline. Stephanie Winston Wolkoff, friend and advisor to then-incoming First Lady Melania Trump. The connection was brief but pivotal. Wolkoff reached out about the 2017 inauguration, asking whether Pierre might consider helping Melania Trump with her gown. At the time, few designers were stepping forward. Many had declined, some very publicly. Pierre was intrigued, if cautious. According to reports, he met with Melania, and they quickly connected over their shared affinity for elegance, restraint, and symbolic design. He agreed to design the inaugural gown, not knowing that this single dress would define the next phase of his career, and in many ways, change the trajectory of his life. All that resulted in an off-the-shoulder vanilla silk crepe gown, tightly fitted with an attention-seeking slit skirt and a bold, contrasting claret ribbon. The look was simple yet expressive and had a great deal of admiration for sophistication. It was at the inaugural ball in 2017 that Melania made her debut in this outfit while standing next to her husband, who was sworn in as president that day. The gown was later passed on to the Smithsonian, enabling Pierre's creation in perpetuity to become a part of American history. But next to the applause came a wave of backlash. Detractors from within fashion as well as outside, it was thought that dressing Melania Trump was a proud political statement, and Pierre had just delivered one whether he liked it or not. Soon after, rumors began circulating in the fashion circles. There were speculations about some designers refusing to take his phone calls. Others alleged that he had crossed a line by styling a controversial First Lady. However, while Pierre never said anything publicly about it, those who know him say he has been quietly blacklisted from certain circles in high fashion worlds. Some insiders treat him like a persona non grata, although he has impeccable credentials to prove his standing in the industry. This caused a bitter fallout as Pierre never desired the limelight. According to him in interviews, the decision to work with Melania was artistic, not ideological. It was a professional cost, however, real. It was a jolt to Pierre, who had carved a career on taste and technique, not public branding. In the wake of the 2017 gown event, what had formerly been behind-the-scenes craft became front and center flashpoint. Yet all this while he should be working with Melania, not just for some public appearances, but most importantly, in a much more profound, collaborative, and intimate way. That first dress enchanted more than a line of joining. It was state-building. With that, Melania went back to him again for public events and private occasions, constructing an established work relationship that went beyond the political noise. With hindsight, it will be possible to see clearly that that phone call from Wolkoff was not only a call for a professional lifeline, but the commencement of a personal journey whose lesson would test Pierre's values, loyalty, and endurance. Apparently, he couldn't have known the extent of notoriety that dress would eventually assume, or how far-reaching its effects would be. What started as a one-time opportunity turned into 8 years of association with one of the most polarizing first ladies in recent memory. In an industry where image is the be-all and end-all, Hervé Pierre made a quiet, defining choice that may have cost him some claim to acclamation in certain circles, but that gave him something even rarer: purpose, permanence, and the trust of a client who never stopped believing in his vision. He didn't know it then, but agreeing to that first dress would cost him more than he expected, and not just professionally. Shut out by the fashion elite. Hervé Pierre knew the stakes when he agreed to dress Melania Trump for the 2017 inauguration. The fashion world, long known for its progressive leanings and tight-knit social dynamics, was already in an uproar. Designers like Tom Ford, Marc Jacobs, and Sophie Thiolette had publicly declared they would not dress the incoming First Lady. While some saw that as a principled stand, others warned of a dangerous politicization of fashion. Pierre, for his part, remained silent, letting his work speak for itself. But behind the scenes, the fallout was beginning to take shape. One incident in particular would stay with him. In a 2025 interview, Pierre revealed that he was once denied service at the front door of a well-known American designer's boutique in New York City. The reason? His continued styling of Melania Trump. "You are not welcome here," the salesperson reportedly told him, despite the fact that Pierre was a paying customer, not a political spokesperson. He recounted the story not with bitterness, but disbelief. "You can criticize Mrs. Trump," he said, "but to say to someone coming to shop, full price, that they are not welcome, that is something I would have never expected." At this instant, his perception of the American fashion landscape would change forever. Build on design, not controversy, was his career motto. And now, to dress the First Lady, or anyone else for that matter, without fanfare or personal discretion, becomes a professional liability. The industry's outrage carried with it anyone associated with her. Rumor even flew among the stylists that working with Melania was considered destroying one's career at certain elite houses. True or exaggerated, the message was clear: association could remove everything from you. Ironically, all the scorn came neither from the fact that Melania chose a garish aesthetic, but from what she wore or did not wear regarding national loyalty. Critics were none too shy to point out when she donned European designers like Dior, Dolce & Gabbana, or Louboutin. But Pierre stood up to that narrative. He pointed out that some or often American labels were worn by her, sometimes by under-the-radar designers, sometimes custom pieces made just for her. And Pierre himself made no secret of the fact that he shopped for her at American retail stores like Saks and Bergdorf Goodman, and that he always paid full price. "We support American business," he insisted. "That's not political. That's personal." With this divide in culture, it was quite evident. Designers who could not stop talking about the opportunity to dress a First Lady now distanced themselves from any association in interviews or on social media. Pierre became somewhat of an outsider himself, though not for any change in his work. It was purely the changing context of his work. Friends became circumspect. There were no more calls from collaborators. He began to feel increasingly alone as he became engulfed in a firestorm he never wished for. Yet through it all, he was quietly and steadfastly working with Melania Trump, with dignity and discretion and pride in the craftsmanship of the work. That day and its coldness of welcome scream silent rebuke in him. It was not about losing a retail opportunity. It was symbolic of the moment, a closure of openness, closure of dialogue, closure of nuance. What had been a habitat of reinvention and cross-pollination had become a battlefield. And Pierre, once so naive as to think that the profession was a purely creative endeavor, had become the champion for how personal had increasingly become the political. Pierre remained unyielding. "So some won't dress her, alors," he said. "Et c'est bien." This was a political stance for some, but for him it was about honor. And honor, he deemed, far outweighed runway approval. What happened at that storefront in New York shook him to the core and reshaped his view of the American fashion world. Her most personal gown yet. When Melania Trump stepped into the spotlight at the 2025 inaugural ball, all eyes were on her gown, and for good reason. Once again, she had chosen Hervé Pierre to design it, the same designer behind her iconic 2017 inaugural dress. But this time, the collaboration went deeper than fashion. It was personal, deliberate, and symbolic in ways that only those closest to the First Lady could truly understand. While many assumed Pierre would simply help her choose a dress, he did far more. He created it from sketch to seam, in what would become one of their most intimate and meaningful fashion statements yet. The result was a strapless off-white silk crepe gown, refined yet dramatic, adorned with two stark black silk gazar bands that wrapped around the silhouette. The simplicity of the color palette, black and white, echoed Melania's well-documented preference for minimalism and timeless design. But the centerpiece wasn't fabric at all. Around her neck, she wore a borrowed diamond brooch from 1955, designed by Harry Winston and styled as a choker. Its presence was more than aesthetic. It was a nod to history, craftsmanship, and the quiet power of restraint. It represented words and phrases in, according to Pierre, the reason the gown was metaphorical. A ribbon encircling a bouquet of flowers. The quality of delicacy, unity, and control, qualities, he said, imbued into Melania Trump, while her husband took office as president represented visually. It emerged from an initial sketched idea. The First Lady immediately identified with it. She found the balance between notions of softness versus strength and tradition versus innovation. It was not just an appearance of elegance to her. To wear it could mean something, to speak even when choosing not to. What many might not have known was, such was the interest Pierre took in this dress. In an inauguration night statement, he described it as simply an honor to design it, and he stressed that Melania had a hand in every decision. It was clear that Mrs. Trump was gravitating toward a combination of black and white, true to her own style and vision, he says. Their partnership grew intuitively over the years. Pierre had come to know her taste, her values, and above all else, her wish to remain beyond trends and headlines. The dress was much less a political statement than a statement of personal growth. Yet beneath that grace, a second layer of influence came to life only after the fact. Pierre disclosed a poignant truth. Witnessing the restoration of Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris after the catastrophic fire of 2019 had deeply stirred him. What the artisans did with patience, care, and reverence for detail so moved him that he almost wondered why he entered design in the first place. It was that reverence toward the cathedral and its restoration that he ultimately instilled into this dress through the filtering of clean lines, careful construction, and subtle symbolism. The European craftsmanship was infused with American elements, such as that Harry Winston brooch, to recognize the connection between two places in Melania's world, her homeland and her new home. Some spectators referred to this as her most sophisticated look yet. Others, however, saw it as a quiet act of defiance, opting to continue working with Pierre regardless of the criticism heaped against them in the industry. But to Melania and Hervé, this was not about perceptions. It was all about consistency, loyalty, and clarity of vision. After all those years of scrutiny, they no longer dressed for the public. They dressed with purpose. It was not about making headlines or being better than the past. The 2025 dress would be about reflection on the journey they had taken together, the meanings they had sewn into every stitch, and the story that only a designer who truly understood her could tell. But what Pierre later revealed about the design's true inspiration may surprise even her most loyal supporters. From haute couture to lampshades. In the fashion world, reinvention isn't optional, it's inevitable. Hervé Pierre, once a name spoken in reverent tones at the ateliers of Carolina Herrera, Balmain, and Oscar de la Renta, found himself confronting this reality head-on after the turbulence of 2020. When COVID-19 swept through New York, it did more than empty runways and shutter stores. It brought Pierre's fashion business to a sudden halt. His label, Atelier Kaito for Hervé Pierre, which he had launched with pattern maker Nicolas Kaito, couldn't survive the economic and political storms. The atelier shut its doors, and Kaito returned to Paris to work at a luxury house. Pierre, left in New York, had a decision to make: fade quietly or evolve. He chose the latter, though not in a way anyone expected. In a world where fashion icons often chase mass-market lines or reality TV fame, Pierre went smaller and stranger. He turned to interior design, but not just any interiors. He began creating bespoke lampshades for an elite clientele, channeling the same precision and attention to detail that once went into couture gowns, into silk shades and custom decor. The pivot may have seemed unglamorous to outsiders, but for Pierre, it was simply a new canvas. His approach to lighting design reflected the same sensibilities that defined his fashion: subtle structure, layered texture, and quiet drama. Some perceived this move as a retreat, but many of those who followed Pierre's trail of journey saw it otherwise. The pandemic destroyed his business and, in so doing, illuminated an industry that revered visibility more than substance. For a designer like Pierre, who had always preferred to lay low, moving into interiors was almost a kind of creative refuge. No red carpets or paparazzi, just silk, shadow, and symmetry. In his behind-the-scenes work, one relationship remained unchanged: his ongoing collaborations with Melania Trump. Even with new businesses being discovered, Pierre continued doing hair and makeup for Melania's public appearances, all trips and official events. So with those two, it was built on trust and shared aesthetics, long past any political cycle and pandemic upheaval. A separation began when the fashion houses pulled away and the headlines grew dim, but Melania kept calling Pierre. He also would say later, purely personal. She understood his skill, and he understood her rather understated approach to public life. Together, they constructed a visual language that was defined not by trends, but by precision, elegance, and intent. There were shreds of rumors that the closures were not only about COVID-19. Pierre's ties with Trump's family had alienated important clients and deterred him from attracting backers. Whether it is right or not, these whispers told a real hard one. In the fashion world, politics and perception usually outweigh raw talent. Pierre didn't have to confirm those claims, though. His unwillingness to retreat from the runway and focus on interiors, all while keeping up a discreet, loyal presence in Melania's orbit, was proof enough. Atelier Kaito was, in hindsight, perhaps less of a loss than it was a redirection. The lampshades, the interiors, the private fittings, these were not downscales but upgrades. Hervé Pierre had designed for public awe for decades. Now he was creating for intimacy, for legacy, for the kind of friends who could appreciate silence and subtlety. In standing by Melania's side, he not only preserved a partnership, he reinvented what loyalty and longevity looked like in an industry that all too often recalls neither. And beyond that quiet transformation, Pierre found something far more enduring than headlines: purpose without performance. He lost his brand, but gained something far more enduring through his quiet loyalty to the former First Lady. A bond built on vision and trust. From the outside, it may seem like Hervé Pierre simply styles Melania Trump, but those familiar with their long-running collaboration know that what exists between them is far more nuanced. A creative partnership rooted in trust, discretion, and a shared philosophy about elegance. Over nearly a decade, their relationship has grown into one of the most quietly enduring bonds in the world of political fashion. At its heart lies something rare: mutual respect and a refusal to chase trends, attention, or applause. Pierre has described Melania's aesthetic sensibility as very clear. She knows what she likes, and more importantly, what she doesn't. Her wardrobe has always leaned toward restraint over embellishment, clean lines over theatrics, symbolism over flash. For Pierre, who trained in the traditions of haute couture and favors structure and storytelling over spectacle, the alignment was natural. He often speaks of her style in almost architectural terms, designed not to overwhelm but to elevate. She prefers pieces with intent, he once noted, things that say something quietly. Behind their seamless public appearances is a creative process marked by deep consideration. Melania reportedly involves herself in every stage, from color palette to fabric texture to how a garment moves. She is not, as Pierre has hinted, a passive client who simply wears what's suggested. Instead, she brings a point of view, a visual instinct, and sometimes a surprising emotional layer. Pierre has credited her with teaching him a different kind of precision, one that goes beyond the physical design and into mood, message, and memory. Their collaboration also operates in stark contrast to the noisy world of fashion PR. There are no splashy lookbooks, no aggressive branding. They rarely, if ever, speak publicly about the pieces until after events. Even then, the details come slowly, a deliberate strategy that reinforces the First Lady's preference for privacy. Pierre, too, has embraced this quietness. Over the years, he has become known not just for his eye, but for his discretion. Their relationship has survived not because of visibility, but in spite of it. Melania's wardrobe choices often carry symbolic weight, sometimes interpreted or misinterpreted by the media. But for Pierre, her style is never reactive. Instead, it's composed like a language, fluent in subtlety and gesture. He has said that understanding her character, her guardedness, her strength, her independence, helped him design not just for her body, but for her presence. Each garment, in his view, must align with who she is, not just what she's doing. That insight has allowed him to create pieces that feel seamless, as though they were extensions of her own voice. Rumors suggest that one of the most defining moments in their partnership happened not at a ball or summit, but behind closed doors, during a quiet conversation before a major state visit. Details remain private, but insiders hint that it was in that moment, away from cameras, stylists, or strategists, that Pierre truly grasped the weight of his role. He wasn't just dressing a first lady, he was helping her express something she would never say aloud. Since then, their bond has only deepened, grounded not in fashion politics but in something rarer: creative fidelity. In an industry obsessed with image, Hervé Pierre and Melania Trump built a relationship based on something deeper: understanding. But it was a specific moment behind the scenes, away from the spotlight, that truly defined their partnership. The inauguration night. Nobody saw. January 20th, 2025, was a night of high ceremony, global attention, and political spectacle. But behind the scenes, beyond the shimmering chandeliers and media flashbulbs, Hervé Pierre was quietly grappling with nerves. He had dressed First Lady Melania Trump once before, in 2017, for her first inaugural ball. That gown had been widely praised and eventually housed in the Smithsonian. Yet 8 years later, with tensions higher and the political climate even more polarized, Pierre admitted privately that he felt the pressure all over again. "It doesn't belong to you once it's out there," he said. "You just hope you've been true to yourself." What few realized at the time was how intensely personal the 2025 gown had become, not just for Melania, but for Pierre himself. He collaborated with a Chinese-American seamstress at a small New York atelier to construct the strapless off-white silk crepe dress, trimmed with 2 striking bands of black silk gazar. Every element was chosen for intention, not embellishment. Even the jewel, a 1955 diamond brooch from Harry Winston, was more than an accessory. Styled as a choker, it nodded to heritage, restraint, and American craftsmanship. Pierre borrowed it for Melania not just for sparkle, but to reinforce a theme: timeless symbolism. As with the 2017 gown, the inspiration was deeply metaphorical. Pierre described the silhouette as a ribbon encircling a bouquet of flowers, a visual that conveyed unity, delicacy, and quiet strength. The image resonated with Melania, who, according to Pierre, was drawn to the balance between structure and softness. It was clear that Mrs. Trump was gravitating toward a combination of black and white, true to her own style and vision, he said in a statement the night of the ball. It was a gown that didn't just reflect her taste, it reflected her sense of purpose. In a move consistent with inaugural tradition, Pierre did not accept payment for the dress. The gesture, he explained, was about respect, both for Melania and for the historic nature of the occasion. Rumors circulated that the design process had been emotionally charged, as both designer and First Lady revisited what their collaboration had endured. The criticism, the boycotts, and the quiet loyalty that kept them working together while others distanced themselves. For Pierre, this wasn't just another commission. It was, in many ways, a closing of the circle, a second chance to tell their story in fabric. The media's reception of the gown was cautiously admiring. Some praised its architectural precision, others noted the poetic restraint. But there were those who saw in the look a coded message, a subtle response to years of scrutiny. Online discussions returned quickly to old controversies, and whispers swirled again about political money, privilege, and loyalty. Even as she danced with the president at the Commander-in-Chief ball, Melania's appearance became a lightning rod for speculation. And as always, Pierre found himself caught in the crossfire, praised for his craft, yet pulled into debates he never intended to enter. What Pierre revealed later added another layer to the night. The restoration of Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, following the devastating 2019 fire, had deeply influenced his thinking during the design process. He was struck by the artisan's commitment to beauty, patience, and legacy, and he sought to channel that spirit into something wearable. "We need to promote American craftsmanship at the highest level," he said, aligning the dress with a quiet mission to elevate the unseen labor behind elegance. The night may have belonged to politics, but for Hervé Pierre, the dress was something else entirely. A quiet act of resilience, of remembrance, and of design as devotion. But beneath the shimmering lights of the inaugural ball, whispers of political money and old headlines returned. And Pierre finally had to respond. The $60,000 controversy. In 2022, headlines buzzed with a curious detail buried in campaign finance reports. Hervé Pierre, best known for styling former First Lady Melania Trump, had received $60,000 from the Save America PAC, a political action committee aligned with Donald Trump. Almost immediately, speculation ignited. Critics and commentators suggested the payment was tied to Pierre's work in fashion, styling, custom garments, or perhaps even wardrobe consulting for Melania during the former president's public appearances. But the truth, as it turns out, was far more complicated and far more personal. At the time, Pierre stayed mostly silent, letting the noise pass him by. But in 2025, with a second Trump presidency underway and the spotlight once again on the people behind the scenes, Pierre finally opened up. In a statement to WWD, he clarified that the $60,000 was not for fashion work. He referred to it simply as consulting, without elaborating. Rumors swirled that it had more to do with logistical advising or creative input for Melania's initiatives, rather than anything involving design. While no official breakdown of the services was released, Melania Trump herself publicly defended Pierre in a rare statement, standing by him and calling the speculation baseless. For Pierre, The controversy marked one of the few times he was dragged from his carefully cultivated privacy into the political spotlight. Known for his discretion and behind-the-scenes professionalism, Pierre had long avoided media drama, preferring to let his work and Melania's wardrobe do the talking. The Pack story threatened that balance. It reduced nearly a decade of artistic collaboration and mutual loyalty into a line item, treated by some as a scandal rather than a nuance. "It's always easier to assume," Pierre reportedly said to a close associate, "but not everything is a costume." The episode was especially disheartening given the trajectory of their relationship. Pierre had worked with Melania since 2017, designing her inaugural ball gown and staying on as her stylist through 4 years in the White House and beyond. Their work had spanned not just fashion but symbolic storytelling, carefully chosen colors, silhouettes, and designers that often spoke more loudly than words. And yet, despite that trust, some were quick to paint the $60,000 as a transactional reward, ignoring the broader creative and advisory roles Pierre had quietly assumed. Rumors also emerged that the payment was timed around early planning for a possible second administration, wardrobe logistics, travel consultations, or early design work for international appearances. Whether true or not, these suggestions at least acknowledged Pierre's continuing presence in Melania's orbit, not as a hired hand, but as a trusted advisor with deep institutional knowledge of her image and style. His work, after all, was never just about clothing. It was about identity. And Melania, for all her silence, understood the weight of that contribution, especially in the spotlight of political life. So what do you think? Did that one phone call really change everything for Hervé Pierre? Or was it just the beginning of something much bigger? If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button for more behind-the-scenes stories, and check out one of the videos on your screen next. We think you'll love them. Thanks for watching.